All right, today we're going to talk about inverse variation graphs. So a lot of vocab at the beginning, so make sure you get this all written down. So for this, a function that never passes through the origin, there's two parts of the graph in opposite quadrants called branches. If the parent function of y equals 1x and the x and y are both asymptotes, and then you can have a vertical asymptote, you can have a horizontal asymptote. So vertical asymptote is your x values. So vertical goes this way. So your equation is x equals a number. And then horizontal would be moving this way. And that equation would be y equals wherever it crosses the y-axis. All right. So an asymptote is an imaginary line that a graph approaches but never touches. So it gets really, 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 really close, but it's never going to equal that value. And the intersection of the asymptotes is a point called the foci, and that's a C. All right. So now as one value increases, the other decreases. Or as one value decreases, the other increases. So for this, I plotted the points, so try your best. I know some of these aren't the easiest numbers to do, but go ahead and I want you to first label your quadrants. And then you're going to plot your points as best as you can. Obviously, you do the ones that you can do. And when you plot them, they're going to get very, very, very close to the axes, but not quite touch. So this is an asymptote here. This is your vertical asymptote, and that's x equals 0. And then here is your horizontal asymptote, and that's y equals 0. So if you notice, the number is never going to, for the domain, it's never going to be 0. So you would write it like this. And then for your range, it's never going to touch 0. So you would write it like this. Now, if you were to have a -1 over x, that would look different because it's in quadrants 2 and 4. So it would look like this. So it'd be for negative. This is a positive. All right, and the foci is at 0, 0 for the origin. All right, again, this should look very familiar because the inverse variation function are similar to the quadratic and square roots. So if A is positive, the graph will be in quadrants 1 and 3. If A is negative, it'll be in quadrants 2 and 4. The larger the absolute value of A is, the further away from the branches are from the foci. And then here, again, very similar. Remember, H is going to be with X. So your horizontal asymptote is K. So it will shift the line, the asymptote up or down. And then here, the vertical will shift it left or right. So depending on what H is. All right, so let's go ahead. I did this first one. I started it. So let's look here. So right now, this is telling us 2 is going to be your vertical asymptote. So remember, the negative's still there, so we're going to make this a positive 2. So to graph that, it crosses the x-axis at 2. So that's x equals 2. All right, now your horizontal asymptote is -3. So it's going to cross a y-axis at -3. So go down here, and yes, we do the dashed lines. All right, they both intersect at this point, which is your foci at 2, -3. And now to figure out where to plot it. Well, first off, A is positive, so we know it's going to be in quadrants 1 and 3. So that's one hint. And then also what I do, truthfully, is I just pick a point that's to the right of where the foci is. And then I pick a point that's to the left, and I substitute it into the equation up here. So here is where you plug in your points. And in this case, when x is 3, y is -2. And that's where I got that point. And then I'm going to go to the other direction. I'm going to go 1 over from the foci, and I'm going to put a 1 in to this equation, and then I will get -4. So when x is 1, y is -4, and that's this point. And then go ahead and just graph them, but oops, you don't want to touch. Get very, very close, but don't touch. All right, now let's go back and let's look at this. So we said the vertical asymptote was 2. So your numbers are going to get really close to 2, but they're never going to be 2. So you would say all the real numbers. And then here for your horizontal, they're going to get really close to -3, but it's never going to be 3. And then like I said, quick check, your quadrants 1 and 3 for your branches. So you're good, that makes sense. Let's come over here. Now this one's different because if you notice, you have a -a. So this negative is going to be important because it's going to change which quadrant you're in. So you've got here, your 3 is still there for your h, k is still here. So now let's graph it. So x equals 3 should go, it crosses the x-axis at 3, and then y equals 1, it's crossing the y-axis at 1. They intersect at that point, which is your foci. And then now, to plot your points, if you notice, the a value is 1, and it's a negative. So we're going to go in quadrants 2 and 4. All right, so since this is 1, you can just pick, I usually just go one diagonal up and over, or down and over. All right, or pick a point that's 2 here, which would be 4. Plug it in. And then when x is 4, y is 0. And then I'm going to go this direction, and I'm going to plug in 2 to your equation. And then when x is 2, y is also 2. And then you can go ahead and plot them. Now again, notice your a value is 1. So I'm just going to go up and over 1. Or I'm going to go, so I'll go up and to the left, or I'll go down and to the right. So you'll start to notice a little pattern with that. Oops, sorry. And then like I said, for your domain, you look at your h value. So it's going to be really close to 3, but it's never going to be 3. And then for your range, look at your horizontal asymptote or your k value. And it's going to be very close to 1, but it's not going to touch 1. All right, you're going to do these two. This one's a little different because if you notice here, you have an a of 4. So this is one that's going to be further away from the foci. So first, let's go ahead and graph. Now remember, this is really x minus -3, and that's why I got -3 there. All right, and then so to graph x equals -3, it crosses the x-axis at -3. And then here, horizontal is y equals 2, so it's going to cross the y-axis at 2. They intersect at that point. That's your foci. And then now from here, again, you can just pick points to the right or left and then figure out. So I did -2 into your equation, and I said when x is -2, plugged it in, and I got y was 6. So I went -2, y 6. And then I did another point where I said, okay, if x is 1, and you can pick any point you want, ones that make sense. I said when x is 1, y is 3. So that's where I got this point. And then basically what I did is I just reflected it across the foci. That's one way to do it. Or you can kind of think of it as a pattern. Since a is 4, from the foci you can go up 4 over 1. Or you can go to the up 1 over 4. Or you can go down and to the left. Or you can go down 1 over 4. So if you notice, it starts to become a little pattern, and it's definitely more spread out from before. Now, just like before, look at your h value. It's going to be all real numbers, but not -3, because that's your asymptote. And then here, look at your k value. It's going to be all real numbers, but not 2, because that is your asymptote. All right, now for number 6, there's a couple things. Notice that's a 9, and it's a negative a value, so it's going to be in quadrants 2 and 4. All right, last part. So for this, you're going to write an equation given this parent function. And I wrote this down here so we have a more room. But this is a parent function, but you can also think of it like this. So if you've got 1 over x minus 0 plus 0, so if there's any change to here or here, or up here, you know that there was some sort of transformation. So let's look here. If you went left 3 units, and remember it's always x minus, so then that's going to give you x plus 3. So you know you went 3 units left, and this plus 5 is 5 units up. All right, put that all together, so that's your transformations. Here, the asymptotes now is telling you a little bit differently than up here. So here, if the asymptote is x equals 4, that's your h value. So you know that's going to go here. And if it says y equals 5, well, that's your k value. So then that's going to go there. And then, of course, I always simplify. And then the last part is it's reflected over the x-axis. Because it's reflected, you've got that negative. So let's go negative, and we change this, and this is the transformation. And then last, we have a vertical asymptote of 5. So again, it's just a different way to say your h value. And then a horizontal asymptote, so horizontal is your k value, of negative 3, and a vertical stretch of 2. That's your a value. Oops, there's a. And then now, just go ahead and rewrite it, put it all together. And then that is an equation with your transformations. All right. So that is how you do inverse variation graphs. There's a lot of information here. Make sure you're watching the video, writing down all the notes, and then asking questions if you need help.